give it one more minute and then we can start. Cool. I say no time like the present. Let's dig into it and folks can enter. That's the other thing. If anybody has classes or you need to bounce in and out, that's totally fine. We will be recording this and sending it out. So no worries there if you have to jump off early. Cool. So I'll introduce myself first. My name is Juliana. I'm part of Matriculate's full-time staff. I use she, hers pronouns, and I work on the recruitment and training side of things. So some of you may have gotten a few emails from me or many emails from me throughout your advising fellow experience. So I'm pretty removed from the high school fellow side of things. I work on the recruitment and training side for our advising fellows as well as our leadership team. So AFLT, HAF, and NAFLT. And I'm really excited to speak about the head advising fellow role with all of you today. I have my email up there as well as our fellowship box account. So if after this you have additional questions that we didn't cover, you want to chat about leadership or really any part of your Matriculate experience, I love connecting with students. Please feel free to reach out to me. We can put on a meeting, whatever works best for you. But much more exciting, we have some student leaders here with us today that all have firsthand experience in the HAF role. So I'm super grateful to all of them for taking time out to join us today. So I'll kick it over to y'all to introduce yourselves.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carson. I'm a junior at Princeton, and I'm the HAF for the 2021 cohort. Thanks, everyone, for being here.
Hi, I'm Maddie. I'm the 2021 HAF at UW-Madison.
Hi, everyone. My name's Kaze. I'm a sophomore at Williams. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I'm the 2022 HAF.
Hi, everyone. My name's Layla. I'm having some camera issues today. My pronouns are she, hers. I'm a junior at Princeton, and I'm the co-HAF for the 2021 cohort at Princeton.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. And one more thing I wanted to say before we dive into the content is we have a pretty small group, so feel free at any point to throw some questions in the chat as we're going through the presentation. You don't have to wait till the end. You can also unmute yourself if you have something to say, use the Zoom raise hand function, whatever works for you, because this is really your time to get your questions answered. So please do not hesitate. Cool. So I'm going to start with some overview of the head advising fellow role and the application. And then after we get through the kind of nuts and bolts of it, we'll have some opportunity to hear the personal stories and experiences of our students on the panel. And then we'll end with some questions and next steps. But really, if you have questions throughout the session, do not hesitate to jump in. Cool. So we will start with the head advising fellow application overview. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about eligibility. Pretty straightforward, but in order to apply for our leadership positions, you need to be enrolled as an undergraduate in one of Matriculate's partners institutions. Since all of you are presumably advising fellows, I don't think that's going to be an issue. So head advising fellow is a 2-year role. So in order to participate, you'll need to be you'll need to be starting your junior year next year at the latest. So it's open to juniors, sophomores, and freshmen, but that's really primarily at new campuses. Otherwise, our other 2 leadership positions, NAFLT and AFLT, are 1-year positions. So if you're looking for a bit of a shorter leadership commitment, I'd recommend maybe pursuing that as an option. However, NAFLT is open to students who have already held a prior Matriculate leadership position. But that's the only role that has that eligibility requirement. So for the other 2 roles, no prior leadership experience with Matriculate is necessary. In addition, you have to be an advising fellow in good standing. All good standing really means is that you are actively engaged and a member of your current cohort. And then the one kind of eligibility requirement here that there is a bit of nuance depending on your campus. I won't get into the weeds there, but if anybody does have questions about it, feel free to stay on at the end and we can talk, is being able to be legally compensated in the United States. Compensation depends depending on what campus you're at. So if you have questions about that, feel free to let me know. Next are applications. So we do use a universal application for all of our leadership positions, which I think is really great because if you're interested in leadership, but you're not sure exactly what role is the best fit for you and your, goals, I really recommend that you apply to multiple. The first couple of questions are universal across all positions, and then we have a couple of role-specific questions, but it's all housed in the same application on SM Apply, which is the same portal that you used when you applied to be an advising fellow, so it should look pretty familiar. There is a kind of preset priority, so if you apply to multiple roles, we'll consider you for HAF, then NAFLT, then AFLT, if you were to apply to all of the roles. Third, we have our performance task. So this is a bit more scenario-based, a bit more specific than some of the kind of larger, more theoretical application questions. And it's just an opportunity for us to get greater insight into how you might approach the role. I think it's also a good opportunity for students to see, oh, this is a scenario I might face in this role. Does this scenario, appeal to me? Does this feel aligned with the skills I want to develop, with the goals that I have? Does this seem like, a role I'm actually excited about? And the one thing I really like to highlight in terms of the performance task, you will see on the application, we ask students to spend no more than an hour on it, and we really do mean that. It doesn't have to be the most beautiful prose you've ever written. There's no one answer that's the right answer. So really don't stress about it too much. 1 hour is absolutely, hopefully, sufficient. And then after the application process, which is due by March 28th, so coming right up, we have the interview process. So in most cases, you'll have a single interview, and that will be conducted by the campus lead. So the Matriculate staff member that's assigned to your campus, who hopefully you've already gotten a chance to build a bit of a relationship with. Also, in some cases, there are second interviews. That's not required across the board, but if you do have a second interview, that's nothing to worry about. It's really just kind of student by student basis. And those interviews focus a bit more on like scenarios and also just an opportunity for you to expand on the questions that you asked in your application. Does anybody have any questions? Thanks, Carson, for hopping on that question in the chat, but any questions about the application process? Cool, we're cruising. So next, what do we look for? Okay, good. Making sure I didn't skip double slides. So next, what do we look for in our leaders? So we use a leadership rubric that we use actually for all of our leadership positions. So this is the rubric that we'll be using to evaluate you throughout the application and interview process. It's also something that we hope to refer back to during your tenure as a leadership member in Matriculate, because we really want to make sure that students have an opportunity to grow their leadership skills throughout this role. So in the interest of transparency, I want to show what these skills are. But I really want to emphasize the idea of growth and of skill potential. So I think looking at all of these skills on this page can be very overwhelming and can cause an unnecessary barrier to students. But a huge part of this role is growth. So we don't expect, the same way that we don't expect advising fellows to come in with like an encyclopedia full of knowledge about college access, we don't expect you to have all of these skills totally, confident. We really want to work with you to develop these skills. As a staff member working with HAFs, I get to develop my skills and my management every year. So I'd love to kind of hear, to make this a bit more real, I'd love to hear from our HAFs about any skill that you feel like when you started as a head advising fellow maybe was an area of concern for you, or something you weren't as comfortable with, and something that you feel you've been able to kind of grow and develop throughout your time in the role.
I can speak to some of this. I think personally, the management has been a really, really big thing for me. And sort of just learning like how do I think about managing not only my advising fellows, but also my advising fellow leadership team or AFLT, and thinking about like how do all of those things go together? How do I work on delegation, but also how do I keep an eye on sort of everything that's going on? I think the HAF position sort of asks you to have a bird's eye view of everything that's going on in your cohort. And I am so happy to have a co-HAF that I share that responsibility with. And so it's not all just me, but I definitely think I've sort of grown in being able to like quickly take snapshots of what's going on in my cohort and sort of like keep a pulse on things that I need to address or follow up with on specific advisors.
Yeah, I would just add that for me, like my organization skills, I felt like were like strong going in, and I think that was like important to like hitting the ground running. And then I think just like building up on the feedback skills over time, and just like how do you incorporate feedback into making a stronger experience is something that I've worked on, and that the role has given me a chance to grow in.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for sharing. Yeah, so just really want to emphasize that, you know, if there are some skills on here that you don't feel as confident on, I really wouldn't want that to deter you from applying. George, did you have a question?
Yeah, I had a quick question. Are co-HAFs common to like all campuses, or do some campuses only have one HAF? Because I'm at Penn and I didn't know that there were two.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the number of head advising fellows at a campus is all dependent on the ratio and the number of advising fellows that we have. So our goal is to keep it at give or take 30 advising fellows to one head advising fellow. So every year we have our kind of prediction or projection of how many advising fellows we would expect to have entering a new class, and that's dependent on the trends that we've seen in prior years. However, sometimes we have, you know, it's an imperfect science, right? So that can result in adding additional head advising fellows later in the process. So for example, Kay's at Williams did an amazing job with recruitment. We got a bigger size cohort, and then we were able to have one of our awesome AFLT, Emily, step into the head advising fellow role. So it really depends on the ratio. This year we actually have our first campus with 4 head advising fellows, which is really exciting. That's our virtual fellowship because they were able to reach a lot of students. So shout out to anybody in the VIF who's on this call. So it all depends on the numbers, but it's mostly 1 or 2. So that is to say that, you know, we would never hopefully be in a situation with a 100-person cohort and 1 head advising fellow. So I can't exactly give like the number of head advising fellows that each campus will have because it's based on the ratio of recruitment. Does that make sense? It's kind of a long-winded answer.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Yeah, of course. And I saw some other really good questions in the chat that I just want to make sure. I feel that my language was unclear around first year, so I apologize for that. If you are a current freshman, you are absolutely eligible to apply for any of our leadership roles. I was referring to at new campuses, we'll have people that are first years that have never been an advising fellow before because it's new with that campus. That will be leadership. That's the unique situation. But if you're a freshman, apply for all the roles. We'd love to see you apply for all of them. And then I also just wanted to highlight Sophie's question. So not everybody will have an interview. We do review the applications and then move folks forward to the interview stage. So kind of similar to advising fellow, after you submit your application, there will be a little waiting period, and then you'll hear about if you moved on to that interview stage. And then I will say, unfortunately, if you are abroad in the fall, that is not usually possible for students to take on a leadership role just because it's a very sort of extensive onboarding and training process. And a lot of that, involves like getting to know your campus, building that cohort community. So for the first year, we really ask students to be on their campus. So if you're planning to be abroad, then that is likely not the best fit. Cool. But thank you so much for those great questions. Keep them coming. So now I'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of the role. So the overview of the HAF term, the 2-year term. So you'll start off with training in the late summer. Usually that training is in person in New York City, where Matriculate is based. This year, likely due to COVID, we will likely have an online training, not guaranteed yet, but most likely. Then after your training, we will move on to the recruitment phase. So this is the bulk of the fall and the late summer. So you'll work with your team, your head advising fellow, your advising fellow leadership team to recruit and select advising fellows. Then after that, in the spring, once you've recruited the students, it's time to start training them. So that for anybody in the 2022 cohort, that's the phase we're really just finishing up now. So that involves planning for advising fellow training, having a fun kickoff gathering, beginning to build relationships and community in your cohort. And then the phase that we're in now, moving towards actually getting paired with high school fellows. So helping your advising fellows become confident in their foundation of advising skills and helping them become prepared to meet their students and really start their roles. Then in the summer, you'll start tracking and managing your AF and HSF relationships. You'll continue to deepen your relationships with the advising fellows in your cohort. Then your second year of the HAF role, you'll have another training similar to the one that you've had in the fall. It's really cool to see students progress at that second training. So students that came in the year before as incoming HAFs haven't really started the role yet, and then they get to attend the training again. They're senior HAFs. They have an opportunity to provide some like mentorship and best practices to the new leadership class. It's a really cool moment to see. Then we have our senior year milestone. So senior fall, you're really working on application tracking for the students in your cohort, financial aid, getting your high school fellows ready with, the final deadlines and all that. You'll also be providing some recruitment support for those incoming HAFs on your campus. Then in the spring, college decisions, enrollment, transitioning, supporting the incoming high school fellows, and really, celebrating the end of this amazing advising experience with your cohort and with advising fellows. Does anybody have questions here? George?
Yeah, so how long are the summer training sessions, especially because there might be like conflicts with other programs or something? And do they happen like, late summer, like the last couple weeks of August or?
Yeah, that's a great question. So with the training being online, there's kind of more opportunities for a combination of live sessions and pre-recorded sessions. So if it was in person, it would be a 2-day training with 2 long days, but it will actually be spread out over the summer, and we'll do some preliminary, once we have our leadership class accepted, we'll do some kind of availability gathering and then determine the times from there. So it will be late July and early August, but I can't say the exact times because a lot of that will depend on, the students we have gathered together, what their internships are, what their jobs are, what their time zones are. But it will be an opportunity to come together as well as do some independent work. It is very important for students to be able to make those sessions. However, we understand that things happen and they will all be recorded as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. So now talk a little bit more about the training process, because I think that's really important for students to feel that they'll be supported throughout this role. It's not just a one-off training and then they're just kind of thrown out there to advise and lead their cohort. So in the summer, as I just spoke about, you'll have a training with all the other head advising fellows from every single campus we work with. You'll also be training with AFLT and NAFLT. There will be senior leaders at that training as well. So there's some opportunity to skill share across college campuses, also skill share with students who have already been living the leadership life for a year, which I think is really cool. We'll have a series of workshops with Matriculate staff. Then in the spring, so that actually for our 2022 head advising fellows, that training is in about a month from now. There will be another training that is focused less on recruitment because that phase is already over, much more about management, operations, organization, community building, things of that nature. Then, as I said, you'll attend that summer training for a second time, this time as a senior HAF. So the things you focus on will be different. It won't be focusing on recruitment. It will focus on senior year milestones and management, and you'll have an opportunity to kind of mentor those new leaders. And then throughout your HAF experience, you'll have monthly calls with all the head advising fellows across campuses, which is a great opportunity to meet students from other fellowships, share resources, and just build friendships. There's also other staff professional development opportunities, college point convenings, different kind of events that pop up that students may have opportunities to attend. Any questions here, or also head advising fellows, if there's anything you feel that's glaring, that was an important resource or important part of your role that I didn't capture here, you can also feel free to add in that. Cool. Alrighty. Now I just want to speak about some other support structures we have in place for students. As a head advising fellow, you'll have a one-on-one weekly meeting with a staff member. So in the fall, that will be with a member of the recruitment and training team. And then once you're kind of past the advising fellow recruitment and training period, you'll transition to meeting on a regular basis with your campus lead. As I mentioned on the prior slide, there are also monthly all HAF calls. We also have Slack channels we use to communicate with Matriculate leadership. So ways to keep in touch, share resources, all that good stuff. We also have a lot of different content and resources that we use that are ongoing and continually developed. There's also different professional development opportunities. Staff is able to write references and letters of recommendation. I'm really passionate about ensuring that this is not only an opportunity for you to serve the other students in your fellowship and support high school students, but a professional development and just like personal growth opportunity for you as well. So if you have specific skills you're really excited about, specific elements of educational equity you're passionate about, I really love seeing the way that students tailor the role to their own like passions and interests. So we really want to work with you to where we can tailor the role to fit your unique needs and goals. And additionally, there is also always staff support in challenging situations. So there are things that come up in your cohort, or if you're just facing a challenge, we never want you to feel alone. Proactive communication in this role is really important. We're always here to support you. So just know that though you're on your campus leading your students day to day, you always have us here supporting you and collaborating with you along the way. Anything to add here? Any questions? Fabulous. Okay. So I'm not going to kind of dig into this with too much detail, but again, as I mentioned before, there are multiple leadership opportunities. Some of you may not know exactly what's best for you. That's great. That's why we're here. And there are a lot of shared responsibilities across each role, though they are distinct. So again, if you're not sure, I do recommend applying to multiple roles and then just kind of seeing where your best fit lies along the way. So as a head advising fellow, you will collaborate closely with the members of your advising fellow leadership team. Seeing the teams like bond and, work together to achieve their collective goals is really, really cool. And one of my favorite things to see every year. Each team really does develop like their own identity, their own, style, their own approach, and it's awesome. So you will all be collaborating together throughout the process. I'm not going to go through the weeds here too much because I want to make sure to devote a lot of time to the panel. But if you have any questions about where the roles kind of overlap or what that collaboration process looks like, please let me know. You can also stick on at the end. So now, less of me talking and more of our students who have actually had these roles and can speak to what it's like in the day-to-day process. So we're going to hear from them on these. We have a couple of kind of set questions, but in addition, this is really for the students on this call today to get your questions answered. So if you have anything that you want to learn about that is not mentioned here, feel free to ask that as well. So first, we're going to talk about the HAF experience. So I'd love to ask for our 4 panelists, just to kind of give a little overview of what your HAF experience has been like so far, maybe something you know now that you didn't know when you first applied, maybe one of your favorite things that you've learned.
I can start, just to get it going. My experience as an HAF has been incredible. I wanted to start off with this and just like let you all know that it's been like the most impactful thing that I've done like as a college student. So I would highly encourage all of you to apply. I think I've learned a lot about leadership, about like, managing a large group of people. And, normally as a college student, you don't get the opportunity to do that, especially like managing such a large group of your peers. And so learning about that has been really insightful. And I guess what I didn't know when I was applying, but I know now, is that like all of Matriculate staff is amazing and like super nice, and getting to know them is like just such a benefit of the role that goes undiscussed. So yeah.
I can go next. Again, yeah, same as Carson. I've loved being HAF. It's been so much fun and so rewarding, and just like the best way to spend my first 2 years in college. I think big things that I've learned. I know I talked about this in the first info session, but when I started, I was really bad at facilitating to large groups of people. I could not, public speaking was not really my thing, but I have become so much better at that and so much more comfortable. And I think skilled at talking about the issues that I care about, and also talking about, Matriculate curriculum and being able to get ideas and curriculum across to people in an effective way. And yeah, echoing Carson again, the staff are amazing. My campus lead is Lakeisha, and I love her. We are like actually friends now, which is something I never would have expected from like a adult college student job relationship. And I know a lot more about educational equity and the issues that Matriculate works to face than I ever would have thought I'd get into like going into the program. So.
Wow, beautifully said. Don't make me cry in the call. Yeah, well, thank you both for sharing those experiences. And if anybody, I think since we have 4 students, if I don't want to cut anybody off with our answers, but maybe if we just do like a couple for each response so we can get through them. Cool, so now kind of the less feelingsy stuff. Let's talk about the responsibilities and time commitment. I don't want to, sugarcoat it. The HAF role is a big time commitment. We estimate it's about 8 to 10 hours a week. I think there are definitely, the students can speak to this better. There are some weeks where it does go over that, some weeks that you might not have that much to do. But I'd love to hear all of you kind of talk about maybe what else is on your plate in addition to Matriculate, how you've been able to balance that, and as well as maybe some moments where it has been challenging and how you've kind of pushed through moments of burnout or moments, where you had a lot of finals or a lot of other responsibilities on your plate.
I guess I can start, and I guess I'll preface this by also saying I think I'm the youngest HAF on this call. Like I'm still in my first year as an HAF, so I definitely haven't had the same experience as the rest of the HAFs on this call. And as Juliana said, it is a big responsibility, and that comes with a lot of time commitment. I think especially during sort of the like recruitment season, like there's a lot of like keeping an eye on like metrics, like really owning a certain part of recruitment. Like my owning area thing was logistics. So it was all about like tracking like percentages and like checking on progress of like applications and like reaching out to candidates. And so like a lot of my time sort of went into sort of the back end situation. I definitely think, you know, there's times when it can feel like a lot, and like I'm on Airtable for like hours, like going through all these different views and trying to figure out like what's going on with this like one student who is having like a certification problem. But the thing that I'd say here is I think staff is really receptive to that. And you know, when I need to like take a step back, like I connect with Juliana or my lovely campus lead, Chrysalin, and tell them like, hey, like I've got finals this week, or hey, like a family situation has come up and like I need to step away. And I think I'd just say that like staff has always been just so helpful and amazing. Like there was a challenging situation that I had to deal with early in the recruitment process, and it took up a lot of my time. I think like Juliana and I were on like 3 meetings like back to back for like an entire week. Like there was a lot of meetings, and it was a lot of time that sort of went into dealing with that challenge. But at no point did I feel like I didn't have the support of staff or of the rest of my team. And I also think it's a really good time to practice delegation and thinking about like, I'm the type of person who like wants to do everything myself, and that is not the way to be an HAF. That's just going to burn you out super quickly. And so I think I learned really early on to rely on my AFLT and say like, hey, like you guys deal with this, let me know what's going on, but like I do not have time to do this. And that's why your AFLT is there. And so I think that's something that like all of you should be aware of, is that like you have a team built in, and you should really feel comfortable using them to make sure that you're sort of able to stay sane with all of the other things that I know all of you have going on in your college lives.
Yeah, and I can share a little bit, and then I think after that I might have to step off, and I'll share my email in the chat one more time just in case anyone else wants to reach out to me with any questions. But before I became an HF, the time commitment aspect of it was probably one of the things that scared me the most. And so I reached out to the HAF of my cohort and asked him, you know, basically the same question. And the answer that I got from him was a very honest one and a very not sugar-coated one at all. It was, you know, there is no magic formula to figuring out how time management works. Everyone's different, and you just kind of have to play around with prioritization and figure out your schedule, what you need to work on now, what can wait. I don't know if that was the best answer I could have received, but I think it was the fairest answer that I got. But since then, I would definitely agree and say that time management within the HAF role is a lot of playing around and figuring things out. There is a bit of a learning curve at the beginning, but just kind of segueing off the point that was previously made, learning how to lean in to moments when you need help and recognizing when to ask for it, before that way things can get taken care of before, you know, it just kind of explodes. So I've been really lucky enough to have a really awesome co-HAF who's on the call, a really cool campus lead, and even before doing recruitment, our AFLT was amazing. So this is just a common theme throughout Matriculate, where the support structures that are in place are already very strong and really incredible, where if you need to take a break and to step back temporarily, that structure is in place. You just need to recognize how to lean into it. And that can be sometimes really scary, really difficult. But that, I would even say that's probably an area where I've grown a lot too. In terms of the responsibilities, I think one thing that I wish I knew before going into HAF, becoming an HAF, is what does management look like? Because, you know, you get a lot of, as an advisor, you see a little bit about what your HAFs are doing currently, you know, managing, you know, facilitating off fellowship meetings, having one-on-ones, office hours, and so you get a taste of what it looks like from the outward facing role of HAF. But I think on the inner role, I think I wish I knew, how I wish I had a better idea of like the nuances of Airtable, and how those systems work. So, management can look like a lot of different things depending on the size of your fellowship, and it's hard to go into that without getting into the very nitty-gritty details of everything. But usually what a week looks like is just kind of keeping tabs on the advisors and working with our leadership team and with our campus lead, just to make sure that everything's going well, reaching out pretty regularly. Management seems like a pretty scary word, especially when, like, for Princeton, our cohort is 100 students, and it does seem like a bit of a scary thing, but once you get over the learning curve, it does kind of smooth itself out. And then at the beginning part of your tenure as an HAF, recruitment is, there is no discrepancy on any kind of confusion there. Everyone pretty much knows what's going on. The training system there is top tier. But yeah, and then there's a lot of repetitive points in a way, especially now Carson and I are at the latter end of our term as HAFs, and so things are starting to, we're in a bit of a lull for our second year AFs who might be in the call. But you just, every week is a new week, and you really do get what you put into the role as well. So with that, I do have to go, but I'll drop my email. I'm so excited to see all of you here, and I'm sure you'll all be great candidates. Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you, Layla. Take care. Yeah, so beautifully said, all of you. There are a couple of things that I do want to highlight. I think the fact that you do have a team is really important, but also, as Kay said, there are sometimes moments, unexpected scenarios that do come up that we have to work together and collaborate on. Those, sometimes are few and far between, and then sometimes there are unanticipated challenges that come up. For example, the pivot to this new virtual world with COVID, that was definitely something that a lot of people in class of 2022 put a lot of, work into, and a lot of extra time into. And then I also want to say that, for students that don't have 8 or 10 hours a week to dedicate to Matriculate, that's fine. And if that's you, but you want to get more involved in leadership, I think the AFLT role could be a great option. That's more 4 to 6 hours a week, and that's a 1 year commitment, really more like a semester and a half. So the entire fall semester through like end of March. And then if you're passionate about it, there are some opportunities to continue supporting your cohort with leadership. But I just want to highlight that too, because I think that's another great option. Awesome. Let me see. Okay, great. Layla's email. I didn't know if there was a question in the chat. So now I'd love to hear if HAFs have a particular moment that was really rewarding that you'd like to share, or a particular moment that was not so rewarding, that was difficult, to kind of, give some more concrete examples of HAF life.
I feel like we're in a phase right now for the senior cohorts that is one of the most rewarding and wonderful to be around, because people are starting to get their decisions, dream schools and like great financial aid packages and big scholarships and all of that. So being able to like almost live vicariously through the AFs who are having those conversations with their students. Like obviously I'm having those conversations with my 2 students, but also getting to feel the energy from everybody else in the cohort, all having this like basically at the same time, has been like so amazing and like so uplifting through like midterms, especially right now when I get to read a session summary that's like my student got into their dream school. That's like so wonderful. And also I think at UW, I really love the community that we have, and the fact that like, even though we're quite small, we do have people who like continually will come to social events and we get to hang out. And it was like pretty awkward at first, but now at all fellowships, like we don't even really need to do structured icebreakers anymore. Like we can just send people into breakout rooms and they catch up with each other. So it really does feel like we formed a good community, and we built that from the ground up. So that was super rewarding. And then in terms of challenges, I think definitely time management. You know, you guys are all students, so you understand what it's like. Sometimes you just get swamped. But for me, at least, and I acknowledge I've had a pretty smooth HAF journey. My cohort's small, and I didn't have like a really intense recruitment period because we were founding and we started pretty late. So in terms of like HAF experience, mine was on the lighter side. Whenever I did get swamped, staff was always there to support me. And I never was in a situation where nobody ever gets mad at you. That's something I want to stress, is no one's ever going to be mad at you if you get busy. They never want you to feel pressured by Matriculate, or they will specifically stress, like, do not put Matriculate over school. If you have school, definitely do that first, and we can deal with Matriculate when it comes up. So there have been like minor challenges, but overall, at least for me, it has not been too stressful at all.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you for sharing. So now, kind of harkening back to the skills that we looked at, I'd love to hear maybe, you know, for folks that are more considering applying, if you have any, you know, skills or qualities that you feel you've really had to lean on to be successful as a head advising fellow. Anything that you feel has really been like integral to thriving in the role.
I touched on this a little bit earlier, but I'd say you have to be organized going in. You'll get trained on like the systems that Matriculate uses, but just have like a good sense of like keeping track of what's going on, documenting your steps, all of that sort of thing. I think is really important. And then I would just also add communication. Like, you can't be afraid to communicate with your co-HAF, with staff, with your AFLT. Like, it should be like a constant like flow of information going back and forth. So like I know, like, especially as a freshman, I had some of that hesitancy about sending an email, and I would reread it a million times before I sent it. So that's okay to have that, but you have to get over it pretty quickly. Because like when you need a piece of information, you need it. And when you need to be able to communicate something, like Matriculate staff needs that too. So just being able to do that effectively and frequently is important.
I'll also add, Carson, like those are both very, very important skills and ones that I've leaned on. I also think being proactive, it's not necessarily like a skill that was on the slide, but something that I think is super important. Staff is always here to support you, but staff doesn't know what they don't know. So if you need help, like, you need to be proactive and let them know. Like, I cannot tell you the number of times that I showed up to like Juliana's or Patrick's office hours and was like, hey, like, I have this problem, I need help with this. And like, they were so helpful and so amazing, but like, they're not gonna know that unless you actually tell them that you need help. I think the other thing that I've really leaned on is being feedback oriented. Really thinking about like, how can I best, like, be the best HAF possible, whether that feedback is coming from myself, which is something that we do in our one-on-ones with your recruitment staff or with your campus lead, from my co-HAF, from my AFs, AFLT, from higher up staff, like being able to really listen to that feedback and think about how you can incorporate that into your own personal development is really important. And the last thing I'll add here is, like, don't feel like you need to be perfect at any of these things. Like, I really think what we look for, not only like in our HAS, but all of our leadership roles and in our advising fellows too, is really just like a potential and just like a willingness to learn. So if you feel like you're not that great at organization, or you haven't had that much experience working with complex management databases, like, that is totally okay. And part of the HAF role is learning and growing. And I think really what staff wants to see is that you're ready and you're willing to learn. So don't feel like you need to like portray like this perfect self, because like that's just not going to happen realistically, and that is totally an okay thing as well.
Couldn't have said it better myself, truly. Yeah, I think communication so often is kind of the foundation for so many of these things. So there will be bumps in the road. There will be things you don't know the answer to. There will be things you've never done before. That's totally fine. That's normal. That's expected. And as long as there's communication, then everything can follow from there. So definitely want to underscore those points. And I think that was beautifully said by all of you. So we do have some other questions on our slides, but what I'd really love to prioritize is, for any of the students on this call, I'd love to prioritize your questions. That can be about, if you have questions for the students or just want to hear them share more about their experiences, or if you want to know more about the application, truly anything. So I'd love to just open it up to kind of open questions. Feel free to unmute, feel free to use the chat. And if people don't have any specific questions, we can just kind of run through a couple of these as well. Yeah, George.
Hi guys, thanks for sharing your experiences. They were very helpful to listen to. My question is, how do responsibilities kind of change in a in-person setting as compared to a virtual setting, or do they pretty much stay the same, or what aspects change?
Yeah, so I guess Maddie and I can probably speak best on this one, because we started in person and then last March happened and everything went virtual. I think that the responsibilities themselves are actually pretty similar. It's the one thing that changes is that your all fellowship meetings, so your meetings with like the whole cohort, are now in a virtual Zoom format. So that means that if you wanted to do something like have food at your all fellowship meetings, that's off the table, or if it is on the table, you have to be a little more creative. It also means that for things like social events and stuff like that, you're going to have to be a little bit more creative in a virtual setting to figure out something you can do. However, I think because a lot of the advising is virtual anyways, some of like the role itself as a head advising fellow doesn't actually change that much from a virtual to an in-person format. It's more just how you organize your meetings with your advisors.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Basically the management and all fellowship side, everything after recruitment has been, I think, pretty much identical, except for that the all fellowships are virtual. And even then, maybe you guys have had experience facilitating over Zoom at this point. I know a lot of people have. Once you get the hang of Zoom, it really doesn't feel all that different to me. So that's actually been nice. And Matriculate's a great organization to do a virtual student org with. At least they were pretty well set up from the beginning.
I would just add quickly, sorry, one other thing is that everything is just harder when it's virtual. Like you can't run into your advisors and like quickly chat with them. There's like no informal ways to like offer advice. So it means that things have to be a little bit more structured in a virtual setting in order to achieve the same goals.
Really helpful. Other questions? Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Hi guys. Thank you so much, by the way, for sharing your experiences. It's been really insightful. I was just wondering if you had any like specific like tips or things that we should consider regarding the application.
From a staff perspective, I would say in terms of our application process, we really love to hear specificity. So I think in terms of those skills that we showed on the slides earlier, really having opportunities where you can show that you demonstrated that skill. And to be clear, that doesn't have to be in a prior fellowship position. It could be in anything. So it could be, oh, I showed leadership when I worked on a collaborative project in one of my classes, or I showed organization because, in high school I worked at a restaurant, or, I had to manage my younger siblings' schedules. It really doesn't matter. We're not looking for any sort of, there's no barrier in terms of the types of leadership experiences that you've had. I think you can speak to anything, informal, academic, personal, internships, whatever it is, as long as you can really demonstrate those skills. So I think in your application, really trying to show some specificity in your answers, I think that that's really helpful. And also not shying away from, both your skill areas and your growth areas, because as Kay said, I think self-awareness is a really huge part of this role. So it's totally fine if you have things you're not comfortable with. We really do appreciate students that are feedback oriented. So if you're able to be, self-aware about the things you're passionate in and confident in, and also the things that, might be a bit of a learning curve, that's really great too. I'm sure students might have other things to add, but that's what I would say from kind of the staff side of things.
I think I'll also add, and I think all of you AFs probably tell this to your HSFs as well, be authentic and be yourself. I think each HAF brings such a unique set of skills and experiences and just way of doing the role. And I think that's something that Matriculate looks for. And something that I have been so happy to have a co-HAF who just thinks about things differently than I do, and can really sort of work with me to frame things in another light, or bring up things that I hadn't even thought about. And so I think really just trying to convey who you are as a person, and what sort of has driven you to be an AF, and is driving you to apply for these roles in the most authentic way possible, is going to help you not only shine in the interview, but also in the application, but also in the interview process, if that's something that's part of your application as well.
Yeah. And the only other thing that I'll add there that I forgot to say is, this is less a tip or trick in terms of, standing out in the application per se, but I also think taking some time, let's say before your interview or after your application, to think about the things that you need to know to make an informed decision if you were offered a role, if you would want to take it or not. Because I want to make sure students also feel empowered during the application process to get the answers that they need to make an informed decision. So if they're not starting the role and having things really, coming out of left field and being surprised by things. So really, I think taking the time to draft up some questions, I just think that's really important. Ben, yeah.
Yeah, I just have a question. How has your guys' relationships with your high school fellows that you're advising kind of changed, or how has it been affected by you being the head advising fellow?
I think I'm just a better advisor because now that I've trained other people on how to advise, and because I know what is most important in the process. I think I'm just, and I also, because I read people's session summaries, so I steal tips and tricks from everybody. So I think my advising has just improved.
Yeah, I wasn't an AF before I became HAF, but I would definitely agree with that. I would also say something that I've done as HAF is I've tried to stay a couple weeks ahead. I got paired quite early with my first student, so I've made an active effort to kind of try and keep my students a little bit further ahead of everybody else. This is totally optional, and for some students this just wouldn't be possible. High school students are in different spots, but it was really helpful for me to have my students already done with FAFSA when people were just starting to do FAFSA, that sort of thing.
That was a great question. Any other thoughts that people have, things they want to share? Yeah, George.
What are some difficult situations you guys have been put in as HAFs, and how did you kind of deal with that? Things like motivation and things like that. Not individual, but motivating others, I feel might be something. But yeah.
Yeah, I think something that I've been working with my own cohort on is sort of like accountability. I think part of, being an HAF is like having to, make sure like people attend like the all fellowship meeting and like are progressing through training and are advising their HSFs, and like there's a lot of moving pieces there. And so I think, sometimes like personally it can be really frustrating when like I'm not getting the responses that I need from my AFs, or they're not meeting like deadlines or that sort of stuff. And I think sort of working through that, and like, one, I think it's great that HAFs are also AFs because you also have that experience. So you're working alongside your AFs, but also thinking about like, how do you set values early? And like one of my cohort's values is integrity. And how can I sort of like use that value to like help my AFs think about like how they can make a change? So for example, like if an AF isn't communicating with me in the way that I expect them to, like trying to be gracious about that, but also saying like, hey, like this is one of our values. We've talked about this before. Like, this is how I see you not currently meeting this value. And this is what I think we can do together to help you meet that value, and sort of like work through, I think, those challenges in sort of like the spirit of teamwork and in the spirit of like empathy. I think is also really, really important. Because I think, HAFs, like, yes, like we're responsible for all of our AFs, and like that puts us in a leadership position, but like this really isn't about like being any superior to like any AFs at all. And so I really think it's about like working together and trying to just like let people know why you're asking for certain things from them, and being really overly communicative with them has really helped me like move through most of those challenges.
Awesome. Cool. Well, wrapping up in our last 2 minutes, but again, I'll be sure to stay on the call after 3. So if people have additional questions or just want to talk in a smaller setting, we can totally do that. So the application deadline is on March 28th. But also if, people have circumstances that come up and you need a short extension, please feel free to reach out to that fellowship email box that you've been using throughout your advising fellow experience and get a lot of emails from. There's definitely some flexibility, not a ton of flexibility, but we can definitely make accommodations as needed. So please feel free to reach out. Or if you just have any questions as you're completing the application, want to clarify things, we want to make the process as transparent as possible, so please reach out to us. And the leadership training will start in July 2021, but the whole kind of application and interview process will continue from late March after that deadline through April and May. So I really want to thank all of you for being here today, taking time out of your Friday, and really, really thank Carson, Kays, Layla, and Maddie for sharing your experiences, speaking so emphatically about the program. It really means a lot, and I've loved working with all of you in my time here. But I'd love to see all of you apply. And yeah, I'll stick around for any more questions, but otherwise, thanks so much for being here, and I hope to talk to you all soon.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh wait, I need to stop the recording.